Hello, welcome to Southeast Asia Speaks. I'm Marites Vitug. This is the show where I get to interview resource persons and newsmakers on issues that affect the region. I will be talking to former Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio on the continuing aggression of China in the West Philippine Sea. Justice Carpio helped steer the Philippines into victory against China in an international arbitration court in 2016. I'll also be asking him questions about the new pro-democracy movement that he leads, Isambayan. Thank you, Justice Carpio, for joining us and welcome to Southeast Asia
A
Speaks.
good day, Marites, and a good day to all our viewers.
First, it's the hottest issue of the day. We're seeing the worst tension between the Philippines and China under President Duterte. It has been more than a month since Chinese ships have been swarming Julian Felipe Reef. Maybe first, Justice, can you tell us why should we care about Julian Felipe Reef? And secondly, how do you see this getting resolved?
Well, first of all, Marites, we have claimed all the high tide geologic features in the Spratlys within the old Kalayaan Island group lines. In other words, we are actually claiming ownership, sovereignty over Julian Felipe Reef. Technically, Julian Felipe Reef is within 12 nautical miles of Gerson Reef, which is occupied now by Vietnam. But we claimed Gerson Reef way back in 1971, and we formalized the incorporation of Gerson Reef as part of the municipality of Kalayaan in 1978 under PD 1596. And under a recent law, Republic Act 9255, we have said that all those high tide geologic features in the Spratlys, including Gerson Reef, is Philippine territory, and we will defend that. So, what is the relevance of Julian Felipe Reef? Julian Felipe Reef is part of the territorial sea of an island above water at high tide that the Philippines is claiming as its own. So under existing law, we are claiming Julian Felipe Reef as a territorial sea, and we have no choice but to protest any presence of Chinese vessels there that violate our territorial rights. Of course, that reef, the Gerson Reef, is occupied by another country, but that doesn't matter because Vietnam occupied that in 1978, long after we have claimed Gerson Reef.
So
Thank you.
we have no conflict with Vietnam about Julian Felipe Reef, although they claim it as well.
Well, we have a conflict, but we have a modus vivendi with all of the ASEAN occupants that we will maintain the status quo. We will not go to war because there is no need to go to war. But if China enters any of our claimed, whether we occupy it or not, claimed territories or territorial waters, we have to protest so that we will not be in acquiescence. China cannot say later on that we have consented to their occupation.
So,
Thank you.
Justice, how do you see this getting resolved? It's been more than a month and they haven't left, or at least many of them are, the vessels are still around.
Well, under the 2002 Declaration of Conduct, ASEAN and China agreed that none of them will inhabit uninhabited features as of 2002. Julian Felipe Reef is uninhabited feature as of 2002 when China signed the Declaration of Conduct. So China cannot put up a structure there because it will violate its commitment under the Declaration of Conduct. And we will have to hold China to that. Of course, if China builds, then China will break that Declaration of Conduct. It will be in violation. And you have to consider this because I think that China will one day violate the Declaration of Conduct by building on Scarborough Shoal. So it could happen at the same time, or one could proceed or happen ahead of the other. Uh, but right now, we can say China should not put up any structure there because of that Declaration of Conduct prohibiting new structures from being built in features that were uninhabited when the Declaration of Conduct was signed. So we should oppose and rally all the other ASEAN countries and our allies and friends to oppose any structure that will be built by China there. Actually, China has not yet built, but by permanently parking their maritime vessels there, they're in fact occupying it already permanently. Thank you.
Also, that is the purpose of the swarming of the Chinese ships, is to eventually build on the uninhabited reef and to show that they own this. That is part of their claim. So that's their purpose. Because maybe also, Justice, can you talk about their strategy? What is their overall strategy?
Well, the overall strategy of China is to establish the nine dash line as the national boundary of China in the South China Sea. So within this nine dash line are the Spratlys, Reed Bank, and other areas, including Pagasa. So the overall objective of China is to make the nine dash line its national boundary. They have said that. And if China can do that, we will lose 80% of our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. We will lose all the islands that we presently occupy in the Spratlys. We will lose Scarborough Shoal. So that is the objective of China. They have not been shy in saying that. They have said that several times. Knowing their objective, we have to oppose this. We have to strengthen our defenses, our alliances. We have to get the opinion of the world against China because this is against the UN Charter, against UNCLOS, and against the peace and stability of Asia and the world.
The
Thank you.
president has apparently kept quiet about it, but he has allowed the defense secretary and the foreign affairs secretary to criticize China. And just this middle of April, or this week, the middle April 13 or 14, the Department of Foreign Affairs summoned the Chinese ambassador. This is the first time under Duterte that this has happened. So is the president allowing just his the tension to be within the level of the cabinet, and he's not joining the so-called fray?
Yes, that is very disturbing because he has to lead in this battle, in this fight to preserve, to defend our island territories in the West Philippine Sea and our exclusive economic zone. So he's sending mixed signals to China. He's allowing his subordinates to do the talking, but he's very quiet. So China is saying, well, the boss is quiet, the boss is not objecting, so we can continue doing this. And that's very bad because it's sending mixed signals, and of course China will say, well, we know that Duterte cannot do anything against us, so we will go on. The president has to make a stand, make a public stand, make a personal statement. He cannot hide behind his alter egos because China will not listen to these alter egos, will probably only look at him for the correct signals. And right now, the president is not sending the right signals.
So, Justice Carpio, you were saying earlier that we need ASEAN to support us, but so far, I don't think ASEAN will support the Philippines in this because Vietnam has a claim also over Julian Felipe Reef. But the Philippines has gotten international support, a lot of it. So how can the Philippines, use this international support against China in resolving this tension?
First of all, Marites, there are two disputes in the South China Sea, the maritime dispute and the territorial dispute. On the maritime dispute, we have no conflict with Vietnam because Vietnam has accepted the arbitral ruling that we have a full EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. Of course, the ruling did not judge who owns those high tide features and their territorial seas because that's a territorial dispute. UNCLOS does not regulate territorial disputes. So our conflict with Vietnam is on the territorial dispute over the high tide features in the Spratlys, but not on the maritime dispute because the maritime dispute are disputes beyond the territorial seas of these high tide features. Of course, we have a dispute with China on the with Vietnam on the territorial dispute, but we have also with Malaysia, and our agreement in ASEAN is we just hold on to what we possess, do not expand, and we will keep it lying there because we don't need to fight each other right now. We have a bigger enemy, China. Let's settle the maritime dispute first because the maritime dispute covers the entire South China Sea. So that's the status quo right now. So we are focusing on our uh, maritime dispute. We have won that already, but China is slowly activating its claims in the territorial dispute. So we have to address it against China without sparking a conflict with our neighbors, Malaysia and Vietnam, because they have also territorial claims. But I have a proposal, and I'm bringing it out for the first time now. We have won a huge victory in the maritime dispute. That's final. The ASEAN countries, including Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, respect that. So we have this territorial dispute, and it involves ASEAN countries, and we should settle this as ASEAN brothers. I mean, we should find a way to settle this, and I'm proposing that we submit to voluntary arbitration the territorial dispute to the International Court of Justice because that's the only way to settle this peacefully. No country will voluntarily concede their claim, and the only way is to submit it to a third party arbitration. And being members of ASEAN, we can do this. And we should not, the Philippines should not be afraid to submit to voluntary arbitration because, in my opinion, we have the strongest case because we have this oldest documentary evidence that we own the Spratlys. We have the 1734 Murillo Velarde map, and we have the Treaty of Paris of 1898 as amended by the Treaty of Washington of 1900, and we have so many legal arguments, and we should be prepared to submit it to an international tribunal because as law-abiding, as a country that respects international law, and as a member of the United Nations, we are required to settle our disputes peacefully through negotiation. And if negotiation will not work, to mediation. And if mediation is not possible or will not work, to arbitration. And we are at this stage already. And when we invite our ASEAN neighbors to submit this to arbitration, we are telling China actually to join us. So on the territorial dispute, we should submit it voluntarily to arbitration. That should be our foreign policy. On the maritime dispute, we have won that. Our ASEAN neighbors respect that. So we don't have a conflict with our ASEAN neighbors on the maritime dispute. On both territorial and maritime dispute, we still have a conflict with China because China is not willing to accept the arbitral tribunal ruling on the maritime dispute. And in the territorial dispute, China is actively expanding its occupation. Thank you.
If the Philippines decides to bring this to the ICJ, does it need to invite other ASEAN states, or can it do it alone like we did in 2013?
Unfortunately, we need the consent of the other ASEAN states for voluntary arbitration because there is no international convention requiring any of these countries to submit to compulsory arbitration. In UNCLOS, all those who ratified UNCLOS agreed to be subjected to compulsory arbitration. Even if they refuse to appear, the tribunal will proceed to decide the case. And that's exactly what happened in our arbitration case. China refused to appear, but the tribunal proceeded to render its decision because China, when it ratified UNCLOS, agreed to that it will be subjected to compulsory arbitration. Unfortunately, in the case of territorial disputes, we don't have that kind of agreement with respect to the South China Sea. Thank you.
Have you had feedback on this proposal, Justice Carpio? You said it's the first time you bring it up, but have you sent this idea, I mean, at least bounce it off the Department of Foreign Affairs?
Not yet. This is the first time that I have discussed it. And I will be writing about this. It will appear tomorrow in my column. And I think it's timely now. Whether we succeed or not in convincing our neighbors, we are telling the world that China refuses to submit this to voluntary arbitration, and China prefers to use force to settle. China believes in might is right. We believe in right is might. And we will win world opinion on our side even more. Thank you.
Now, may I shift our conversation, Justice, to this new political movement you're leading, Isambayan. I think it took some people by surprise that you are now leading a political movement outside the enclave of the secretive and quiet Supreme Court. So what led you to Isambayan? Why are you leading this movement?
Marites, I was approached by Father Albert Abejo, a Jesuit priest, and by Brother Luisito Armin, a LaSalle brother, if I could be a convener, the sole convener to choose our candidates for president and vice president. I said, I would like to be a convener, but not the sole convener. We have to put together a group of conveners, respected people, whom the people will listen, whom the people will look up to as advisors for the nation. And they agreed, and that's why I started with asking Secretary Albert De Rosario and Justice Chick Morales to join, and we expanded. We have people from the labor. We have Attorney Matula, Sani Matula. We have from the military. We have Admiral Ong. We have from the Bayan Muna. So we have from the left to the right the entire political spectrum of democratic forces in the Philippines. These are legal political parties, legal organizations, because we believe in democracy. We believe in the Constitution, that if you join the parliamentary struggle, then you're part of the democratic process. If you give up the armed struggle and join the parliamentary struggle, you are part of the democratic forces. And that's why we have put together this coalition. And everybody agreed to join because of one thing. Everybody believes that unless we are united, we cannot win in 2022. Unless we put up a unified slate, we cannot win in 2022. If we have two or more candidates from the democratic forces, we will certainly lose. And that is why we're able to form this coalition. Yes, Marites.
Yes, there has been, some criticism that you're doomed to fail because Philippine politics is so fractious. It's very difficult to come up with a unified slate for president and vice president. So you must be an optimist, Justice Carpio. How do you think would you respond? How do you respond to this criticism?
Well, I think there are always exceptional circumstances where people come together, and the last year and the last 4 years, 5 years of the Duterte administration have led many people to believe that we have to offer an alternative to the Filipino people. We have to be united. The only way we can win is to be united, and that is what is holding us together. That unless we are united, we will have a government that will become more authoritarian than ever, and we have a government that will put on a national level political dynasties, that the president will anoint his daughter to be his successor. Instead of limiting these political dynasties to the provinces, we will bring it to the national level. And that is against the Constitution, because the Constitution outlaws political dynasties but requires Congress to enact that law, and Congress has never enacted that law. But the principle is there. The Constitution is against political dynasties, and the number one political dynasty, the height of political dynasty, is when the president will anoint his or her daughter or son to be the successor. Thank you.
Are you looking at any political movement as a model outside the Philippines? Some are trying to compare you to the Lincoln Project in the U.S., which was effective in its messaging against Trump.
Well,
Are are you more than the Lincoln Project?
the Lincoln Project was limited to communication. Uh, it didn't go to a political machinery. It did not, but we are doing more than the Lincoln Project, because the coalition, of course, is a coalition of political parties. The political parties will have their own political machinery, but the coalition will have its own machinery also for purposes of the 2022 election. Once we choose, we will not leave the candidates that we choose on their own. We have to support them because it's our commitment. And so we will continue the campaign to have them elected. We will truly support them. So they have their own political machineries because they belong to political parties or political organizations. But we in the Isambayan will continue our support. That is why we are putting up chapters all over the country. We just inaugurated, launched the Negros Occidental chapter under Governor Coscuela. There are other chapters that will be inaugurated soon, launched soon. And so it's more than the Lincoln Project. This is much, much broader and more intensive. Thank you.
So this is not an elitist movement as some have criticized Isambayan, because you're a Manila-centric group, but you said you have labor. Are you expanding to Mindanao as well?
Yes, we are putting up chapters in every province, city, and municipality, in all schools all over the country. They are now being organized. We believe that the youth will play a very important role. Those who, for the first time, will be voting, and we are launching a registration campaign for those first-time voters so that they can vote in the coming elections. So this is we are not limited to Manila base. We have, of course, Governor Coscuela, who is from Negros, and we will be probably. We have now, as a member of our conveners, Mr. Lanto, Attorney Lanto from Marawi City. So we have members of the Isambayan from all over the country now. Thank you.
About your timetable, Justice, when will some Isambayan choose candidates, and when will this be announced? Because October is the
Well,
filing of candidacies.
that's correct. October is the filing of candidacy, so we will have to make an announcement before that. We originally planned August or September, but the political uh, the experienced political politicians in our group said that in the past, presidential candidates declared June or July. So we may have to move that earlier to probably July instead of August, September. But we are pressed for time. But certainly it will be at the latest probably August, because the candidates candidates will have to organize also. Thank you.
So, is it possible? Would it be possible that the candidates themselves, those you have spoken with, choose, just talk among themselves and decide who will run, so that it doesn't need to involve all the conveners? Is that a scenario you're looking at?
Well, the coalition partners of the Isambayan have gave their commitment to Isambayan that if Isambayan will choose, they will follow. They will abide by the decision. So it's difficult to change that to tell them to abide by the decision of another group. So that could excuse me, that could be a big problem. So we don't want to disturb what has been agreed upon already, and because if another group will make a choice and the members of the Isambayan will say, we will not be bound by that. That is not our agreement. So it's difficult to go back on that agreement now. And nobody is trying to change that. Even the candidates themselves are not proposing that tayo na lang pag-usapan na lang natin ito. They are not doing that because they know they need the support of the coalition. The only way the coalition can be held together is to respect the decision that they have made before. Thank you.
My final question, Justice, is what have you learned so far? All these months that you're leading a political movement. I know that you were involved with the executive department during President Ramos's time, so you understand politics. But this is different, isn't it, Justice? What have you learned so far? Are you frustrated, or where do you get your optimism from?
Well, we do not have a choice, Marites. I mean, if we do not act now, then the other side will continue. The same administration will govern the Philippines in the next 6 years. And this administration has shown that it's totally incompetent. It could not handle a pandemic. Our GDP is negative 9.5, was negative 9.5 last year. And I don't think it will be positive this year because of the lockdown. I've talked to many businessmen and they said it's going to be worse this year. And 50% of the small and medium scale enterprises have closed, many permanently, and they employ the most number of people. About 10 million people have been unemployed now. This is the worst economic performance of any government since end of World War II. And this is a government that has refused to defend our sovereign rights and our sovereignty over islands in the West Philippine Sea. This is a government that has conducted a war on drugs without regard to human lives. Unofficially, about 25,000 or more people have been killed in the war on drugs. And these are poor people being killed, defenseless poor people being killed because they are accused of using drugs or peddling drugs, but there is no charge, no evidence, no trial in court, but they are just killed. We cannot live that way. And the president has said, my drug war has failed. The president has said, I am inutile when it comes to defending the West Philippine Sea. And all the economists have said that last year and this year will be very bad for our economy. And how can we allow the present government, present administration, another 6 years after 2022? We cannot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Justice Carpio. On that note, that these are extraordinary times, calling for measures that are also extraordinary to unite our fractious political parties. We end this interview, but we will continue this conversation as we approach elections in May 2022. Thank you to our watchers and to our listeners.